you've had the feeling that art is stuck in kind of a creative rut right now, you're not alone. Music, movies, photography, painting, sculpture, whatever your poison, seems to be weird and has lost its mojo a little bit. Where are the artistic movements of yesteryear? Today's art kind of feels like a greatest hits album on repeat. Sure, there's plenty of content, but where's the soul, the revolution, the oomph? Well, it's kind of been priced out of cities and buried under influencer culture. So why is art stagnating? Artistic movements used to be game changers. Like the French New Wave didn't just give us cool jump cuts, it rewrote the language of cinema. Italian neorealism made you cry over stolen bicycles and leftover bread. In the 70s, Hollywood turned gritty with auteurs like Coppola and Scorsese, showing gangsters and cab drivers could be more compelling than sanitized studio fluff. Even the 80s and 90s had a balance between popcorn movies and indie darlings. Today we're down to what? Marvel sequels and reboots and another Fast and Furious? If art reflects the times, then our times are a CGI explosion with zero character development. But it's not just movies, it's all of art. Music has an even richer tapestry of movements, but all of it feels like artifacts in a museum now. The 50s brought us rock and roll, the 60s brought us the Beatles and Motown and counterculture anthems that made us want to love, protest, and drop acid simultaneously. The 70s birthed punk and disco and heavy metal, proving that there's a genre for every mood. The 80s gave us synth hop and hip hop, while the 90s gave us grunge and the golden age of rap. But what movements have we really gotten in the last 15 years? Mumble rap, TikTok trends, and pop songs that are as forgettable as they are overproduced. Music has lost its edge. It's forgot how to be rebellious and create new things and new movements and have the audience accept these things because it's reflective of the world around them. But again, it's all art. Visual art used to set the world on fire. The Renaissance wasn't just an era, it was the era defining humanism and perspective for cultures. By the 20th century, movements like Cubism and Dada and Surrealism challenged our brains to think differently, while abstract expressionism screamed, you don't have to understand it to feel it. By the time pop art rolled around in the 60s, Andy Warhol had us asking, is soup art? Now contemporary art just feels like it's stuck in a loop of pretentious installations and NFT sales. Like sure, a banana taped to a wall is funny, but is it movement worthy? Photography has lost its edge too. Where are the Henry Cartier-Bresson or the Diane Arbises? They're gone because now everyone is a photographer. It's hard to start a movement when every image feels like a shallow attempt to rack up likes. Photography in its heyday was like the rock star of the art world. The 1930s through the 70s were the golden era of photography, with photographers like Dorothea Lange documenting the Great Depression and Robert Frank redefining what it meant to capture Americana. But now the artistry kind of just feels watered down. And don't get me wrong, there's still great artists out there, but they're being buried amongst the avalanche of influencers trying to create art to get attention rather than to express themselves. I mean, it's crazy. Painting used to be the crown jewel of art, but now it's stuck in a minimalist echo chamber. During the Renaissance, painters like Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci were literally celebrities. Impressionism with Monet and Degas made us rethink light and color. By the end of the 20th century, Picasso's Cubism and Pollock's drip paintings rewrote the rules of what painting could be. But now it feels like the rules are being thrown out entirely in less of a rebellious way and more of a here's a blank canvas, isn't it deep kind of way. So what's the deal with art? Why is it feeling this way? Well, I've been talking a lot about movements and movements are a pretty crucial part of growing art. So why aren't we getting these artistic movements? Well, it has absolutely nothing to do with the talent of artists. Like I said, there are great artists still out there, but the silent killer of art is gentrification. All right, let's talk about cities. Once upon a time, cities were messy, affordable, and alive with creativity. To understand why artistic movements thrived in the past, we need to look at the cities where they were born and, more specifically, who lived in these cities. Throughout the mid-20th century, in the United States, white flight saw wealthier white families fleeing urban centers for the sterility of the suburbs. What they left behind were cities brimming with working class people, immigrants, and people of color who couldn't or wouldn't leave. And what did that create? A vibrant cultural melting pot where diverse perspectives collided to spark creative revolution. New York City, for instance, became an artistic juggernaut in the 20th century precisely because it was messy, affordable, and accessible. During the Harlem Renaissance of the 1920s and 30s, Black writers, musicians, and artists like Langston Hughes and Duke Ellington flourished in an urban environment teeming with struggle and resilience. The abstract expressionists of the 1950s and 60s like Jackson Pollock and Mark Rothko found their footing in post-war New York City lofts. Even hip-hop was born in the Bronx in the 70s, emerging from the rubble of economic neglect. None of these movements would have happened in a sterile suburb where everyone was mowing their lawn and sipping lemonade. Globally, the pattern is the same. Paris in the 1920s was a playground for expatriate artists and writers like Hemingway, Picasso, and Josephine Baker. Berlin's post-World War I chaos birthed the Dada movement, and its post-wall reconstruction in the 90s became a haven for the avant-garde music and art. Tokyo's bustling streets gave rise to anime, which is an artistic cultural force. Great art thrives in cities because by nature they're chaotic, diverse, and imperfect. Suburban life is the enemy of creativity. People who stayed in cities in these movements were scrappy and had to fight for everything that they got. They banded together, forming communities fostering creativity, experimentation, and innovation. So what made these eras and places special? Well, it was cheap rent, dive bars, and a mishmash of cultures rubbing elbows with each other on the daily. But now you can't even find an affordable shoebox in any major city around the world. Gentrification has turned the havens for artists into luxury playgrounds. Think of Williamsburg in Brooklyn or Shoreditch in London. These were once hubs for misfits and creatives, but now they house people with no creativity at all who have never picked up a paintbrush or had an actual artistic idea in their life eating $20 avocado toast. Artists have been priced out of the cities and are now scattering to the suburbs where art feels a bit more distant because you're not shoulder to shoulder with these people every day. Collaboration is hard when there's space in between collaborators. And this isn't just about rent, it's about community or the lack thereof. Artistic movements thrive in proximity. When artists can't afford to live near each other, the synergy that sparks creativity dissipates. Imagine if all the artists from the Harlem Renaissance had been stuck commuting from upstate New York. Would we even know their names today? Gentrification doesn't just displace people, it erases and stagnates culture. When wealth takes over, it sanitizes everything, leaving behind a city that's polished but soulless. Art thrives in chaos, not condos with rooftop pools. But I know what you're thinking. We're more connected now than ever because of the internet. So that has to be a great place for artistic movements to grow and thrive, right? Not really. One, if you've ever been an artist, you know that creativity bounces more freely when you're in person. And two, the internet is just like the internet, you know what I mean? I mean, in theory, it's amazing. Like anybody can share their art with a global audience, right? But in practice, the internet is kind of where originality goes to die. Algorithms don't reward innovation, they reward trends. So you're constantly up against something that's trendy and popular when the most innovative and exciting art gets buried. And then that art is being compared to the popular thing and looks like a failure because it's not as successful. That's why every platform is a sea of copycats and viral trends and remixes that disappear as quickly as they came. Remember when getting a record deal or a gallery show or a film deal actually meant something? Now anybody with GarageBand, Canva, or TikTok can call themselves an artist. And while that sounds great in theory, it's created an oversaturated market where true talent fails to break through. The barrier for entry is way too low now. It feels like everybody trying to be an artist has shown up with the same outfit on and everybody's looking around like, oh, that looks great. Oh yeah, that's fantastic. Oh, so unique. When we all look the same. And then there's the attention span problem, which is just not fixable at this point. But it's not just influencer culture and gentrification that's ruining art. The art community itself is to blame as well. It's the gatekeepers of art, the distributors, the curators, and those in charge of funding that also play a major role in the lack of artistic movements. These are the people that decide what gets shown in galleries, what movies get greenlit, what gets played on the radio or put on Spotify lists. And let's be honest, they're rarely prioritizing artistic innovation over profit. And with these gatekeepers prioritizing profit and not letting artists flourish, we don't get good music, movies, paintings, none of that. I mean, in modern times, it's like they want a sure thing before allowing something to develop and grow into something that could be fantastic. Imagine, for instance, if the Beatles' legs got cut out from underneath them before they had a chance to make something like Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Or imagine if somebody said Jean-Luc Godard wasn't polished enough and we didn't get a film like Breathless. Really, it's just like we're in this weird time for art and culture right now. In the past, movements were born because people invested in their art, whether that meant staring at a Pollock painting for hours or listening to a full Pink Floyd album. Now if your video doesn't grab someone in the first 3 seconds, they're on to the next. How do you create a lasting legacy in a culture that moves at the speed of a swipe? I mean, of course the internet isn't all bad. It's made art more accessible to people and made artists more able to share their art around the world. But accessibility can also contribute to mediocrity. When everyone feels like they're creative and everyone is creating, nobody's leading the creative charge. Movements need their leaders and visionaries who change the status quo. And right now, people are too busy chasing trends to lead us into any new artistic movement. I still have hope though. Stagnation is often followed by revolution. The Renaissance followed the plague, for God's sake. Maybe we're in the calm before the storm and the next artistic movement is brewing in some weird corner around the world, or maybe even online. But we have to start fostering these creative communities for us to be able to do anything of note. But who knows, maybe the next Picasso, Coppola, or Bowie is out there working on their masterpiece right now. But until we see it, let's just keep swiping, hoping for inspiration.